Welcome to the Thoughtful Leader podcast. My name is Ben Brearley. I'm a leadership coach and the founder of Thoughtful Leader. The Thoughtful Leader podcast is all about short, sharp leadership advice because thoughtful leadership is good leadership. Welcome to episode 236 of the Thoughtful Leader podcast. In this episode, I'm going to cover some lessons I think we can take from the younger generations. Now, we can be frustrated sometimes by the actions or the attitudes of people in the younger generations, but I think sometimes we should step back, have a bit of a think, and just consider what are some of the benefits of the things that they're trying to do, the way they approach work and life. And I think there's good things to take out of it which can improve our organizations. So let's get into the episode right now. I've noticed there are several stereotypes about younger generations that are often held up as being the truth. When I'm delivering training and this topic comes up, I'll sometimes do a little stereotyping activity where I'll hear people make statements such as, younger generations are lazy and have no work ethic, young people have no loyalty, they think they know everything, and they always want to know why we are doing things. How dare they? As with many stereotypes, while there may be some truth in these for some people, they won't necessarily apply to everybody in the group, but I also find these statements to be instructive. So what can we learn from the younger generations that can help to shape our leadership for the better? And I mean that for everybody, not just the younger people in our teams. So in this episode, I'm going to take a look at some of the important leadership lessons that I believe the younger generations can teach us. And when I'm talking about younger generations here, I'm referring to the ones commonly labelled as Generation Z or Alpha, born roughly between 1996 and 2010. An important question to consider first is, do the younger generations scare us? Now, I think it's important to acknowledge something about the younger generations. They represent change, and change can be scary. They also represent a threat to the way we've always done things. They threaten our methods and our knowledge, which are part of what make us feel valuable. Imagine if all the things we were good at were no longer relevant, or the knowledge we have was no longer highly regarded. These can be scary thoughts. Now, I believe that many of the people who criticize younger generations do so from a place of fear and uncertainty. But to lead and learn from younger generations, we need to embrace these feelings and prevent them from ruling our behaviour. Take a moment to remember the iceberg model. If we aren't aware of what's underneath the waterline of our own personal iceberg, we may fall into the trap of criticising, belittling, or ignoring what the younger generations are teaching us. And if you don't know what I'm talking about when I say the iceberg model, there's a link to an article in the show notes page which will explain it. thoughtfulleader.com/236 is where you can find that show notes page. So what can we learn from the younger generations? Well, I think there's several lessons we can learn, especially when it comes to leadership. And in many ways, I believe that what they bring to the workplace reinforces useful leadership behaviours, so we should actually stop and take notice. So here are some of my top takeaways that I think we can learn from the younger generations. The first thing is to think about the why to challenge the status quo. One thing I notice about the stories I hear about younger generations is that they tend to question things. Why do we do it like that? Can't we do it this way instead? That way doesn't make sense. Now, this can be very frustrating for leaders because they just want their people to go and do the stuff, not ask questions about it. And it is true that often there are reasons why we do things the way we currently do. However, there are also situations where there is no longer necessarily a good reason for continuing with the way we currently work. Now, earlier in my leadership career, I once took over a team where one team member was in charge of sending out a monthly report. She would spend hours putting the report together and then email it to a distribution group. I asked her who received the report and what they said about it. She said she never really received any feedback. Now, we did a bit of investigation and it turned out that many of the original recipients of the report had left the company and the ones who remained didn't look at it. So the lesson here was sometimes it's good to challenge the status quo. In fact, challenge the process is one of the key practices in Kuza's and Posner's exemplary leadership model. So keep that in mind. If you hear someone say, why do we do it that way? That can be a really great opportunity to think harder about the reasons why you're undertaking the work in the first place. Another stereotype of younger generations is that they don't have any loyalty. They change jobs quickly when they see something that might be better instead of sticking around. Now, Gallup research indicated that only half of millennials, that is Gen Y, said that they were planning on being with their current employer a year from now. Now, I've always had an issue with the concept of loyalty. I see it used as a weapon quite often. I'm going to do what suits me and you're going to accept it because you're loyal. And that's broken. Loyalty should work both ways. You show loyalty to me and I'll show loyalty to you. So the lesson here, if you treat people like rubbish or maintain a demotivating work environment, and they should leave. Otherwise, this sets the precedent for the type of company culture where this type of leadership is tolerated. Now, something that always impresses me about younger generations is that they tend to, in general, focus on enjoyment in life. That's not to say they have no work ethic. I've worked with many younger people who are committed and work hard, but many of them like to maintain a balance. They work, but then they also like to enjoy their life outside of work. A profession that eats too much into that lifetime will sometimes be jettisoned for a more balanced role. Now, we often hear people lamenting that the younger generations have no work ethic, but what they might be is just a little more discerning about where they choose to spend their time. This is instructive for leaders because we should be aiming to create work environments that are productive, supportive, and motivating rather than chaotic, overwhelming, and super stressful. If you hear yourself saying that you want people to have a better work ethic, just check that you don't really mean, I want them to do more work than they are actually supposed to. After all, we have created a work environment across the globe which is leading to higher stress and mental health problems than ever before. So ComPsych data from an American Institute of Stress article reinforces this, showing that 62% of workers across multiple industries feel like they have high levels of work stress. And I'll put a link to that article in the show notes page, and that was thoughtfulleader.com/236. And while you're at it, if you like my podcast or this episode, I would love you to leave a positive review on your podcast app of choice. Helps me get the word out, so I appreciate it in advance. And on an unrelated thought, I'll put a link to the American Institute of Stress article in the show notes page. I wonder what it's like working at that company, because you would imagine they would be very careful about not stressing people out. So yeah, that'd be an interesting thing to look into. So the next thing I see with younger generations is we see younger generations job hopping and jumping to different opportunities, and this sometimes makes us assume they have no loyalty, resilience, or commitment. Or have they simply identified a better opportunity in an organization that is doing things differently? Now, one difference I noticed between now and 30 years ago is the visibility we have into how companies operate. We see news articles and social media posts talking about the attractive benefits. We also see websites like Glassdoor and Seek, which tell us which companies are good to work for and which might not be. So in other words, we are far more informed than we ever have been before. So the lesson here for leaders is to pay attention to the market and the competition. Now, if your competitor is moving to a 4-day work week, for example, your people are likely to know this. And hey, wouldn't you rather work 4 days instead of 5? So it's important for leaders to keep up to date with workplace trends instead of complaining about people that choose to look somewhere else. So younger generations aren't perfect, but we sure can take a few lessons from them, I reckon. The next time a Gen Z, Alpha, or some other new label they come up with person has you frustrated and aggravated, take some time to stop and think. Are they actually challenging some of our held workplace norms and beliefs that might actually be holding us back? And could your leadership benefit from taking some notice of what they say? I'd love to get your thoughts on this topic. What do you think of the younger generations, and do you think they're actually trying to teach us good leadership behaviours, or do you think they're all lazy and not loyal? Let me know in the comments on the show notes page, thoughtfulleader.com/236. I really appreciate your input here. All right. Thank you once again for listening to this podcast. I really appreciate it. Keep up the thoughtful leadership. Take care of those younger generations because they are going to inherit the earth, and I'll be back next week.